Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with Lesson 3, The Temptation of Jesus, of the International Esoteric and Illuminated Bible Lessons by R. Swinburne Clymer. International New Church Lessons, prepared for the Sunday Schools of the Church of Divine Illumination. The Temptation of Jesus. Golden Text. Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Jesus was led, also, into the wilderness of the errors of material desires and illusions. The wilderness here is the material, the flesh, the desires of the worldly things. He was tempted of the devil. The devil is the man of sin, of materiality, of deception, of greed, of lust, and of all wrong. Thus, Jesus was tempted of these things. We read where he had just been baptized or developed mentally as far as man could attain. He possessed great concentration, for was he not tempted to turn stones into bread? He was hungry. The material within him was clamoring to be obeyed, but it was also self calling out to him to minister unto it. Here was the test. If he could turn stones into bread, how much greater power could he influence over other things? He could gain much. He could become the greatest phenomena producer the world had ever known. He resisted the temptation by declaring that man could not live in the material alone, but must live by the word of God, and God does not become material desires and longings. Then again, he attained greater power in mentality. He attained the pinnacle of the temple. What temple? The temple which is the body, the temple of the Christ. And his mind tempted him. The desires of the flesh again tried to weaken him. When he had absolute control of the body through all mental laws, why should he not use these laws for his own benefit, to lift himself up to the highest point among men? Thus he reasoned. But he knew the flesh was tempting the God within him. Many of us are so tempted. If God be God, and has given his angels charge concerning us, if we know God as God, why not attain the heights of the world? Why should we not have the highest place? Could we fall if we know the powers of the angels of righteousness? But for whom are we arguing thus? For self or for selfless? So Jesus said, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And now we read how, as he developed more and more, the temptations were greater. He realized all that he might do. He was possessed of power, mighty power, so much so that the kingdoms of all the world bowed to him. He was able to control them. He could rule over them. He was powerful enough to make himself a king. All he had to do was to abuse or misuse his power. This is a temptation we all face in development. It is the crossing of the roads. It is where the spiritual leads entirely away from the flesh, or where the flesh triumphs over the spiritual. Here is where many fall and have fallen. It is where leadership gains the control of mastership. The master is the one who has served and struggled and is willing to go on serving for love of good and humanity's sake. Leadership is too often swallowed up in vanity and self-glory. Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Jesus turned away from all the alluring, tempting dreams of power and greatness. Then the devil leaveth him, and behold, the angels came and ministered unto him. All forces and vibrations of good gathered around him. Then he departed into Galilee and began to preach. And the people which sat in darkness, meaning spiritual darkness, saw great light. And to them which sat in the region and shadow of death, light is sprung up. Those in the region and shadow of death were those souls which were nearing destruction. Death is the destruction of the soul. The developed soul cannot see death. It lives forever. And those who allow the lust and temptations of the materiality to overcome them were in the shadow of death. He taught them truth, and they saw the light of life, of truth, and departed, repented of evil. We find him organizing. Note that all he called immediately followed him. The live, earnest-seeking student will follow. There were no reckoning and guesses, no disputation. They knew the truth and desired it. Scoffers had pointed to them as ignorant and uneducated fishermen. They were fishermen, but remember, the great souls do not seek the easy places in life. Development comes only through struggles and experience with life. The hardship and the toil of this life open our eyes to many truths. When the soul is seeking for reincarnation or rebirth in the flesh, it seeks the soul in harmony with its own. Now we have the secret of one great law. The man who desires to know and understand men, and men's hearts must be able to understand the least of the world, the humblest of this world. We do not speak against education, but education cannot develop the soul. They were uneducated in the textbooks of colleges of that time in their lives, but they had gathered greater knowledge through experience and perhaps in former existence. But they left immediately all material gain and seeking and followed after truth. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.